This was not a. In the great shifting of global tides, there are forces at work that operate quietly, almost imperceptibly, yet their effects are profound. In 2025, this was not a. One such force is India's strategic position on the world stage. Nestled between volatile neighbors and vast oceans, India stands as a crucial hinge in the Indo-Pacific region. To the west, not the energy-rich Middle East. To the north, the ever-watchful presence of China. To the east, the contested waters of the South China Sea. This was not a. These are not just coordinates on a map. They are flashpoints of economic ambition, military tension, and political gravity. And right at the center of it all, India holds ground, not through loud declarations or flamboyant displays, but by the sheer magnitude of its geographic relevance. For the United States, this was not a. This positioning is more than symbolic, it is strategic. The Indo-Pacific has become the most consequential arena for 21st century power dynamics. This was not a. As China grows more assertive, constructing artificial islands, rewriting maritime rules, and expanding influence across Africa and Latin America. This was not a. Washington looks for partners capable of balancing that ascent, not through confrontation, but through alignment. India offers precisely that, a counterweight rooted in sovereignty, scale and stability. Yet, with such importance comes a certain diplomacy. This was not a. When a partner is as critical as India has become, silence can speak volumes. This was not a. It is not indifference, but rather a careful orchestration. The US may refrain from public censure or overzealous praise because every word. This not a. Every gesture has the potential to shift the delicate equilibrium. This was not a. Tensions with China are already high. Alienating India or boxing it into visible alliances. This was not a. Could unravel years of quiet coordination. Thus, the silence becomes not a gap, but a signal. A form of communication that transcends speeches and statements. This was not a. This isn't the silence of neglect. It's the quiet of recognition. A recognition that India's role cannot be overstated. Its sea lanes, its borders. This was not a. Its ability to shape narratives across the global south. All of these make it indispensable. This was not a. In such a landscape, words are chosen not just for what they say, but for what they avoid saying. The United States, ever the master of subtle geopolitics, understands this, and so, with measured restraint, it watches, it listens, and it waits. For in the silence lies the strategy. This was not a. As the global balance of power subtly evolves. This was not a. One of the clearest signals of this change is found not in military postures, but in the quietum of commerce. India. This not a. Now ranked among the top 3 economies in the world, has become a marketplace too significant to ignore. Its population, now the largest on Earth, drives a consumer base that is both vast and increasingly digital. American tech giants, energy firms, pharmaceutical industries, not a, and investment conglomerates have all taken root in Indian soil. This was not a seeking to ride the wave of its economic rise. But with investment comes caution, and caution brings silence. This was not a to challenge India publicly on sensitive issues risks disrupting this deepening economic entanglement. This was not the United States, whose corporations are woven into India's digital infrastructure, manufacturing sectors, and renewable energy drives cannot afford such disruption. Trade agreements, joint ventures, and data flow pacts are not held together by words of disapproval, but by the preservation of mutual interest. It is here, in the realm of economics, this was not that silence becomes strategy once more, not because values are forgotten, but because stakes have shifted. India's economic rise has not only offered America access to new markets, it has given it a powerful partner in shaping global trade norms outside of China's shadow. Supply chains once tied to East Asia are gradually relocating. This was not and India has positioned itself as a welcoming destination. This shift is subtle, often technical, but the implications are geopolitical. Dependency breeds diplomacy, and diplomacy demands delicacy. A vocal approach toward India's internal affairs, not be they economic or political, could easily be interpreted as interference. And interference, in this climate, this was not risks triggering nationalistic pushback or complicating access for American industries. Washington, keen to secure long-term access to India's markets and talent, this was not chooses discretion over debate. It is not a surrender of principle, but a recalibration of tone. What remains unsaid is as vital as what is acknowledged. This was not the quiet corridors of economic policy hum with decisions not meant for headlines. Trade ministers speak in guarded terms, CEOs attend summits with carefully crafted statements. This was not and political leaders choose words that preserve doors rather than close them. In this mutual silence lies an understanding that India is not merely a partner of convenience, but a necessity in a world reordering itself around new centers of power. In the unfolding narrative of global alliances, there is often comfort in shared ideals. Words like democracy, liberty, and human dignity form the foundations upon which nations build friendships. India, this was not long celebrated as the world's largest democracy. This was not has historically been seen as a natural ally of the United States. The bond appears organic, rooted in elections, civil institutions, and constitutional values. But in 2025, this was not that shared identity has become more complex. Though the democratic banner still flies high, this was not beneath it lie patterns that raise difficult questions about press freedom, minority protections, judicial independence, and civil liberties. And yet, Washington remains largely quiet. This silence is not born of ignorance, but of calculation. This was not to speak too forcefully about these issues risks weakening a partnership seen as essential to regional and economic strategy. In past decades, American leaders were often vocal about democracy and human rights abroad. This was not but when a partner like India becomes central to counterbalancing authoritarian expansion and powering global markets, this was not Such convictions are sometimes whispered rather than declared. It is not that the concerns don't exist. They do. This was not and are widely discussed behind closed doors. But public discourse is tempered. Here lies the paradox: a democracy is drifting. This and its most powerful democratic ally is choosing discretion over declaration. The reason is not apathy. It is the recognition that values, however noble, must occasionally be weighed against necessity. India. This was not with its expanding influence across the global south, is shaping narratives once dominated by the West. This was not to alienate it risks not only strategic loss, but reputational imbalance. This was not the United States has often championed democratic ideals. Yet history shows it also makes exceptions when it suits broader interests. This was not This selective morality is not unique to this moment, but in India's case, this was not the silence is louder than usual. For many watching, it is not just what is being tolerated, but who is being tolerated, and why. In this carefully constructed quiet, there is a subtle shift. The language of democracy is still spoken, but it is spoken more cautiously, more conditionally. This was not it is reserved for moments that serve policy, not principle. And in that quiet compromise, this was not the world begins to see a new kind of diplomacy, one where shared values are acknowledged. There's not but not always acted upon, not out of betrayal, but out of a belief that some alliances must be preserved, even if it means speaking less. As the landscape of international security evolves, so too do the relationships that underpin it. In 2025, India stands not only as a rising economic force, but also as a vital military partner for the United States. Over the past decade, the two nations have deepened defense cooperation through joint naval exercises, intelligence sharing, arms deals, and strategic dialogues. From the Malabar naval exercises in the Indian Ocean to the expansion of the logistics exchange memorandum of agreement, military ties have steadily grown stronger, quietly, methodically, and deliberately. Yet, curiously, this expanding alliance is met with a noticeable quiet from Washington when it comes to India's more controversial domestic or regional actions. This silence is not arbitrary, It reflects the fragile architecture of trust that defines defense relationships. As India modernizes its armed forces and enhances its surveillance capabilities, it becomes an indispensable counterweight to China. not only in land disputes across the Himalayas, but across sea lanes vital to global trade. In this shifting dynamic, criticism, even well-intended, risks disrupting the very cooperation that both sides have invested in. So the words are chosen carefully or not at all. To the casual observer, it may seem like a retreat from American values, but to those who watch the rhythm of geopolitics, it is a dance of necessity, Military alignment is not forged in the open glare of media headlines. It is cultivated in secure rooms through trust, continuity, and mutual interest. And trust, once shaken, is hard to rebuild. So Washington avoids unnecessary turbulence, knowing that every joint drill, every shared satellite image, builds a deeper alliance, one that may one day matter far more than any public statement ever could. Moreover, India's own defense ambitions, its pursuit of indigenous weapon systems, its growing naval presence and its space capabilities make it a partner that wants respect, not reprimand. The US, keen to maintain this strategic bridge, understands that military partnerships are strongest when treated with mutual dignity. In the grand design of deterrence and defense, silence again serves a purpose. It shields what must be protected, it preserves what must be built, and it ensures that, in a time of rising tensions and regional volatility, words do not become weapons. Instead, quiet cooperation lays the groundwork for resilience. Patient, strategic, and profoundly consequential. Across the Indo-Pacific, the seas no longer whisper. They churn with competing interests, shadowed patrols and overlapping ambitions. In this arena was not the United States has found itself recalibrating, not just in policy but in posture. The rise of China, both economically and militarily, this was not has created a pressure point that ripples across continents. And as Washington reorients its focus toward the Pacific, a one partner quietly rises in strategic value: India, not by marching in step. This was not but by offering something far more valuably: independent alignment with shared interests. This was not the containment of China is no longer a distant goal. It is a present, pressing strategy. And within that strategy, India plays a role too vital to risk with overt judgment. India's proximity to contested regions, the South China Sea, the Himalayan frontier, this Nota and key maritime choke points, makes it indispensable to this quiet balancing act. Unlike treaty-bound allies such as Japan or South Korea, this was not India offers a different kind of partnership, one rooted in autonomy, resilience, and regional legitimacy. This was not its participation in frameworks like the Quad is not framed in hostility. This water, but in shared concerns over freedom of navigation, regional stability, and multipolar cooperation. Yet India maintains its sovereignty fiercely, never appearing to serve as a pawn. That delicate balance is exactly why the United States treads carefully. Any public disagreement, especially around internal policy, civil rights, or foreign dealings, could push India into retreat, not toward China, necessarily. This was but away from the strategic convergence that has taken years to cultivate. So the silence persists, not as neglect, but as a form of diplomatic discipline. In this silence lies trust, or at least the hope of it. By allowing India space, the US avoids pressing it into choices it is not yet ready to make. Quiet diplomacy leaves room for organic alignment to flourish. Containment today is not carried out with declarations or rigid coalitions. It is shaped by influence, by economic entanglements, by shared intelligence and interoperable systems. India's role is subtle but powerful, and so, to secure that role, restraint becomes policy. The louder the challenge of China grows, the more deliberate the silence around India becomes, not out of fear, but out of strategy. Because in a world divided not just by ideology, but by interests, sometimes the most effective way to move forward is not through confrontation. But through quiet cooperation that builds from within. In the theater of international politics, words are never just words. They are signals, and silences equally so, as India takes on an increasingly prominent role in global affairs. The question arises, why does the United States, so often vocal in matters of human rights and governance, remain unusually quiet? The answer lies not simply in strategy, but in optics. In 2025, the credibility of global leadership is tested not just by action, but by consistency. And consistency, in this case, reveals a pattern long familiar. A selective application of moral scrutiny shaped by alliances, economics, and geopolitical convenience. To criticize India would demand a mirror be held up to other allies. Nations with questionable records that still enjoy Western favor. From Egypt to Saudi Arabia, from Turkey to the Philippines. The United States has often made exceptions where interests outweigh ideals. Speaking out against India, a rising democratic power with global influence, would invite accusations of double standards and potentially fracture fragile alliances across the global South. Washington knows this, so it chooses its words carefully, or chooses not to speak at all. Domestic audiences, too, play a part in this silence. At a time when the US faces its own democratic challenges, a public condemnation of another democracy may ring hollow or hypercritical. India, with its robust nationalist sentiment and a growing diaspora influence in American politics and business, is not a country that responds passively to external judgment. The political cost of confrontation, both abroad and at home, and outweigh the symbolic value of criticism. Thus, the silence reflects a deeper truthing in today's world. Moral clarity often yields to diplomatic complexity. Public rebuke. This was not once a hallmark of American foreign policy, is now reserved for opponents, not partners. This was not and partners, especially those like India, who are central to the evolving world order, are handled with subtlety, not spectacle. What emerges is a kind of strategic quiet, a silence that is not empty, but filled with intent. It shields fragile cooperation. It avoids setting uncomfortable precedents. And it preserves influence without provoking resistance. In this silence, we glimpse not a failure of values, but a shift in the way power expresses itself. This was not through declarations of principle, but through the delicate art of choosing when and when not to speak.